Hello everyone, welcome to another Voice Essentials Live Hangout, the second one for the year, and we have a special guest coming up. She has been with us a number of times, and I was thrilled when she accepted my invitation to be our first guest for the year, and so we'll get to Michelle in just a moment. Hello to everyone in the live chat. It's so good to have you hanging out with us, and I'm looking forward to seeing your questions, which we may get to a little bit later on. We'll see how we go. Leave your questions in the live chat, and Linda, the ever wonderful Linda, will take down those questions, and Michelle and I might be able to tackle those later in the show. We'll see how we go. If we don't, I'll probably look at them in a couple of weeks, because next week we're going to be doing a live song review with Linda. So we'll get into that. I'll tell you a bit more about that later. Some sad news today that I want to just let us all know about here on the channel and in our community. You may recall a gentleman that we had on the show, I think it was middle of last year. We had Jeff Ramsey join us from Berkeley, and it was a wonderful show, and he was a wonderful guest. Sadly, I received news yesterday that Jeff has passed away. I am not aware of the details, so please don't send me any requests on learning about the details. I don't know what they are, other than to say I know he had been, from what I could see on Facebook, that he had been in ICU for a little while, of which I didn't know either. But he has passed away after he's been battling whatever it was that he was battling, and so great sadness for his family and his friends, and my deepest condolences. And I know I send the community's collective sympathies to not only his family and friends, but also the staff and students at Berkeley that I know are really feeling that loss today. So a special note. He was one of my favourite guests, it must be said, from last year on the show. So generous, so obviously gifted and talented, but just so wonderfully giving of himself and of his skills and talents to us as a community. And I know that wasn't a one-off. This gentleman had, if you just, the tributes being paid to him online are quite moving. So just wanted to let you know that has happened, and that's, it's quite sad. We've got a really interesting, sadly we have to pivot into today's topic. We've got a really interesting subject today, and it's going to be one that's that could easily, if we allowed it to, and we're not going to, it could easily deteriorate into sort of a purely opinion-based sort of ego-driven discussion. We are not going to do that today. We're going to talk about how to find a great singing teacher for you that fits you. And I have got the most interesting little scenario that I want to share with you that literally happened today, and with a new student. I'm going to tell you about that when we come back after the usual bumper that we all know and love. You love it, come on. And when we get our good friend Michelle up in a second. We'll see you in just a moment.
Sound check. Check 1, check 2.
Hey ho, friend, how are you?
Hello. I'm doing great.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to be back here. Thank you so much for having me again.
Do you know what? I didn't realize it had been as long as it's been since we last had you on the show.
I think it's like a year.
It's literally 2018 was when I last had you on the show. That is not acceptable in my books. We need to have you on. We need to have you on more regularly. Just putting it out there.
Well, I would love to. And by the way, this is a great time because it's only 7 o'clock in California.
I moved the time just for you and every other
right.
international guest that I have on the show.
Well, it is very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. It's because to have fantastic people like you on, I couldn't, especially for your Eastern Seaboard American friends, they were coming on like at midnight, and so I wanted to sort of make it a little easier for them, to be honest. So I'm so glad the time has worked out for you. I just forgot to mention to everyone, I was having technical difficulties in the lead up to today's show. If things go awry, please forgive me. I think it's all running smoothly, but I'm just letting everyone know that the usual YouTube hiccups continue. It's almost certainly my user issue, but I'll try to iron it out to make sure we don't have any problems. Michelle, it's so good to have you on. We are going to tackle a really interesting topic today, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One that, like you said earlier, could go south very quickly.
It could really go pear-shaped, but we're not going to. And like I said to you before the show, we trust each other, which is why this is a topic that you and I can discuss, and I think we'll be able to discuss it with a great deal of integrity. And we're going to do that because finding, in fact, you and I, we had some interaction. Was it during January and on Facebook, and you had posted something about bullying and stuff, and we'd talk.
Oh, yes.
You know, the singing, for those who don't know, and there'd be quite a few people in our live chat right now, or people who are watching the video as a replay. The world of singing teaching, I've got my ideas around this, but it is a relatively toxic environment as an industry. It is toxic, and you know, consequently, I personally, I can't speak for you, Michelle, but I have pulled out of a lot of online forums and stuff. It just became toxic, and it wasn't a healthy space for me to be in. You know, because you'd find yourself mentally troubling yourself over the discussions that are going on, and then you find yourself in a position where you're having to defend yourself, and to defend yourself you're having to, you know, you end up sort of firing off your own barbs, and it's just not cool. It's such a icky thing to be doing. And so it is a challenging area to talk about, the idea of how to find the right singing teacher for you and what is the right fit. And I wanted to kick off our discussion today using a personal story that happened this morning, literally happened this morning in my studio with a brand new student who was great. Everyone is going to remain nameless, right? Except for me. So this gentleman came in. I have, as a part of my process, students do purchase their first, so this is all talking about private instruction, private lessons. You come into the studio or online with me, and Michelle, I know you do the same thing. But with me, you do pay for your first lesson, and then you are not obligated to continue after that. But the moment you do the second lesson, you then are obligated to a term's worth of lessons, which is generally 5 or 6, 4, 5, 6. So this gentleman was very open with me, and which I really appreciate. He said, hey, look, I'm just checking out a few singing teachers. I'm booked in to see another singing teacher who he mentioned by name, and I know of that person. And it just so happens that, and then he was saying that he'd actually been told by someone online, because he put it out on Facebook, that he was looking for a singing teacher, and that he was booked in to see myself and this other person. And this another person on Facebook then says to him, oh, don't waste your time with Dr. Dan. He's hopeless, expensive, and I didn't get anything out of the lessons. We didn't sing any songs, which I don't know how that can be thought of. But anyway, and really, really rubbished me and said, I now go to this other singing teacher who he's also going to go and see, and she's been fantastic and I've really loved her and blah, blah. So that's the story. The funny thing about that story is 2 years ago, I interacted with this other singing teacher at a conference who told me that exactly the same thing had happened to her online in reference to me.
But backwards?
Backwards. So one of my now long-term students, this student is actually still with me, had been quite negative about this other singing teacher on Facebook and told everyone, don't go to this other singing teacher. I'm now with Dr. Dan. He's brilliant. I love him, blah, blah. And I'm happy to say she still loves me. And I think it paints a really great picture of the real world of singing teaching. And I said to this other singing teacher 2 years ago, I said, if you've been doing this singing teaching for any length of time, you are going to have a collection of people who love you and think you're amazing. Mm-hmm. And you are also going to have, hopefully, a small collection of people who think you're absolutely the worst thing to happen to singing teaching.
Right.
You cannot please all the people all the time. It is not possible. And so I think it's just a great illustration to kick off our discussion today around, and I wanted to be completely vulnerable to everyone to say, and once again, it speaks to this idea that we try to really build a community of authenticity and truth here, you know. Mm-hmm. And as I've said to everyone in the past, and I'll continue to say it, I am not a guru. I am not the messiah to singing lessons. You know, just because I've got a YouTube channel doesn't mean I know everything. I am human, just like my fellow singing teacher, just like you, Michelle. Yep. It really paints that picture. What are your reflections on my little story?
Well, it's funny because I'm just like, I feel you so bad because, I mean, it's happened to me too, right? Where one person is like, Michelle is the best teacher, go to Michelle, da, da, da. And another person is like, Michelle's a yo-yo. I don't know what you're talking about. She didn't do anything for me. And I think it's so true. And I love how you kind of brought up that thing about kind of celebrity in voice teaching and YouTubing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, one of the things that's so important for us to remember is like, when we are people who choose to have an online platform, whether it's YouTube or, you know, we do a lot of Facebook Lives or whatever it is, that person that we become when we are interacting in that way is not the same way that we're going to interact in a one-on-one voice lesson.
It's not. It can't be.
Kind of not at all. It can't. Exactly. It cannot be. And so when people are kind of talking about which YouTube, because I see this happen too, right? Like there's kind of like the battle of the YouTube voice teachers. And this is why I don't do YouTube voice teaching, right? But it's like this idea of like, which YouTube voice teacher is the best one for me to go to? And it's like that, you have to be in a lesson with that person to see if they are going to have the kind of relationship, the kind of philosophy, the kind of work that you're doing together is really going to resonate, because we're all real people. We're real people with, like, you know, kids and dogs and bills and like all these other things. And that interaction one-on-one is going to be so different. But that's what it makes me think of, is this kind of, as soon as we kind of put ourselves out there a little bit more, it like brings this extra level of like scrutiny, when just get in a lesson, pay for the lesson, and see if that one-on-one magic is really going to work for you.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a little saying, and that is, every single teacher, every singing teacher has something to give you.
Yes.
Every singing teacher has. Some singing teachers will have more to give you than others. Mm-hmm. And that, in part, is not simply because of the teacher. It's also it's also in what you, the student, are able to receive from them.
Right.
And so finding the right fit of singing teacher is, it has to be, it can't purely, and this is why, I mean, I really think you can't make these decisions based on one lesson. And I had that open discussion with this student this morning, which he acknowledged. You know, you really do want to do a term of lessons in, 4 or 5 lessons. It's going to give you that knowledge of how the person teaches, their personality. Is there a, I think after, once a teacher has been teaching for a number of years, and I know this about myself, is, a good teacher can mold themselves to the student. And so, good teachers are not in an inauthentic way, but we're chameleons. We can adjust to the learning styles and what have you of the student. But that does not mean in any way, shape or form that a singing teacher can cover every base. You just can't. It's not humanly possible. And I think any singing teacher who claims they can has a level of disingenuous kind of approach. What are your thoughts to that, Michelle?
Well, I mean, I took so many notes to talk to you today because I'm really, because of my role that I also have I have my voice studio, but because I also mentor other teachers and help them with their businesses, I'm so passionate about this topic. And this idea of humility is really important to me when we're looking for a voice teacher. And so I think that's where kind of you're saying like this disingenuousness is, a voice teacher knows that they have a unique instrument in front of them.
Yep.
And that instrument is to be played, if you will, in a certain special way according to that person's neurology, that person's physiological makeup, all of their experiences that are going to be, either influencing the way that their bodies use breath or their bodies use, tone. And there's a ton of research on like trauma and, and singing and like, just as an example. But I think number one, humility, right? So I have some really like very tangible things to talk about if you want to talk about.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Tangible things. So the first thing that I think is really important for people to understand, and parents, I also want to kind of loop parents into this conversation because it's not just kind of like a grown person that might be looking for lessons, but it's like a parent looking for their child.
Yep.
And that's like a unit, the parent-child unit is kind of a student-client relationship we need to be aware of. So the first thing I always tell people is, listen, just because someone can sing does not mean that they can teach.
Yeah.
They are two different skill sets. They are two different knowledge bases, and they are two different perspectives on how the instrument is used. And also, flip that. Just because someone doesn't have a voice that you think is good does not make them a bad teacher. In fact, many, many teachers I know, because of their vocal injury, because of their vocal pathology, because of what they have had to go through in order to learn how to play their own instrument, are superb teachers because they don't just understand how to play their own instrument and how to sing for themselves, but they understand the instrument in general. They understand the body and the voice in general, and they can help the person in front of them discover what's going to work for them. Because not every person, we all have a larynx, we all have a jaw, we all have a tongue, assuming, right? Most of us do.
Yep, most of us.
Well, I don't want to, people can sing and all. I'm not going to say someone can't sing if they don't have those things. So, it's this idea that like a singing teacher is someone who understands learning. It's someone who understands not just how their body works, but how another person's body might work in phonating, resonance strategies, all of those other things, and then has a toolbox that is full of ways to get that instrument in front of them to do what that instrument wants it to do. So that's kind of the first thing, is like, don't mess up singing talent with teaching talent.
Yeah.
Don't do that, because that you will really go south if you do that. That's the first thing. The second thing is permission. You got to get comfortable with hard questions. So you have to get comfortable with asking hard questions of the potential teacher, and you have to get comfortable with answering hard questions from that teacher. And I believe that a good singing teacher is one that is going to ask you a lot of questions to find out what you need and what you want. And you can be an active part of that process from the get-go by doing a little bit of research, by really understanding what your goals are and what your vocal needs are going into a lesson. So I sometimes I'll get potential students or the parents, and they'll just say, oh, well, I just like to sing and I want to sing better. So, okay, well, do yourself a favor, singer looking for a teacher, and decide what better is. Do you want to increase your range? Do you want to have a better understanding of breath? Do you want to, maybe you've taken lessons in the past, you're looking for your next teacher, and it's like, I really want to balance my registers and really want to work on bringing my mode 1 up into my mode 2, my, or head, voice, chest, whatever words you want to use, I don't care. But, decide what you want and ask those hard questions. And for parents, please ask your teacher if they understand children's voices. Please ask that teacher, do you follow the latest research around how singing in children is different than singing in a growing adult? Do you understand the way puberty affects my child's voice? Will you be able to walk with them through that prepubescent and pubescent and postpubescent process as their voices and their bodies change? And then on the other side, if you're a more mature voice, right? Maybe you're perimenopausal female, maybe you're menopausal or postmenopausal female, maybe you're an older male. Do you understand what an aging voice needs differently than kind of from 20 to whatever it would be voice? Do you understand what happens to the body? Do you understand the thickening of the folds? Do you understand all of these things? Those are good, hard questions to ask the teacher. Yeah. And I think an honest teacher will say, yes, I've studied that, I understand that. Or they'll say, no, I haven't studied that. That's something that I'm not a specialty in. And that doesn't preclude you from studying with that teacher. But what I would say is, does that teacher say, but I would be happy to learn that, to work with you. I can tell that we would have a fantastic relationship. Our communication was good during this lesson. We received and we gave to one another, because I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I very much believe that the student-teacher relationship is this way. And I know that there are a lot of teachers out there that believe it should be like this, that the teacher should kind of be above, more like a master apprentice type thing. But I think you can master apprentice when you have equal respect and that you don't put yourself above the student. Yeah,
absolutely.
So
yeah,
I kind of went off on there, just like
no, that's good. I love you. Blah, 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 blah.
Great, all right. I got more. What do you think? Like, do you, in your onboarding process, because like you said earlier, you said that everyone pays for your first lesson.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely the same with me. In fact, my first lesson is the longest and most expensive lesson, because that's the lesson I take really long time to get to know you. We have a full conversation. I've got a whole intake form. We discuss, blah, 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 and then we have a full voice lesson. So in that onboarding process, I take singers through like a ton of questions, and we really take a lot of time to get to know one another personally before we even sing. What is your onboarding process?
So my onboarding process is probably not dissimilar to yours. I call it the orientation and analysis. And it's the first session, and then we don't do the first singing lesson until it might be a week later or a fortnight later. So we, as you call it, onboarding process is we sit down, we go through vocal health history, performance history. I get to know the person, the human being in front of me, because that's important, isn't it? Especially, in my case, I'm seeing 60 people over 2 weeks. I don't want them to become a number. So we get to know the person, their vocal health history, and all those sorts of things. What are they listening to? Who are they wanting to be? Anyway, then we go through a student pack, because I've got a whole heap of swag that I give people, and then which are learning materials, etc. And then we do a 2-page analysis of the voice. We look at highest note, and this is a snapshot in time. It gives me an insight into what voice is in front of me. So I do a spectrogram, and I do a whole heap of stuff that is a part of the first session. And then we get into lessons proper after that. And so it sounds like we're ticking a lot of similar boxes. I've forgotten your actual question per se.
Oh, I just wanted to know what yours was like.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about, like, how do you find the right teacher for you?
Yeah.
Well, I think as the singer, we have the responsibility to know what we want and what we need. And I think we can go into a lesson, and if that teacher isn't doing work to find out about us, that can be a little something in us that says, maybe this person might not be a good fit for me. But we can also, when we're clear on what we want, like, maybe you're a student who prefers a very transactional relationship with your singing teacher. Maybe you're someone who very much is like, I only want to talk about singing. Pardon me. I only want to talk about singing. I want to jump right into technique. I don't want to get personal. I don't, I just want to jump right in. Some teachers are going to be really good at that. I'm not the teacher for you if that's what you want. I'm not. It's not going to work, because I'm very much about how what's going on in your life is affecting your voice.
Yeah, I prefer to be that teacher, but I've got professional students, and I know you would too, Michelle, who are very transactional, and they are like, and I can flow with that. I prefer the relational lesson personally, but at the end of the day, we're not here for me, are we? We're here for the student, and so we're meeting the student where they're at, and the challenge too, though, is I, the teacher, do need a number of lessons to get the cut of your jib. Like, what kind of student are you? You're not only finding out what kind of teacher I am, I've got to find out what kind of student you are. And so, that can take a couple of lessons for us to kind of go, okay, right, okay, well, I know where the track is now, over the years, the more experience I've had, the quicker I am at that. But, every now and then you get a student that walks in and throws you a curveball, and you go, oh, okay, didn't see that one coming.
Right.
The other thing I find too, and Michelle, I'll throw this out to you, certainly since I've had my YouTube channel, a lot of students do find me, now they'll say they'll come into their first session, the orientation and analysis, and they'll reveal that they've been watching me on YouTube for a couple of years, and now they're wanting to have lessons. So I find, and this is sort of hearkening back to your point about YouTube singing teaching and stuff, I do spend a part of my time managing expectations. And that's because there's this sense of, Dr. Dan might have a magic wand that he can wave and everything will be better. And so managing a student's expectations is a part of the teacher's job, because just because XYZ singing teacher online said that it can happen in 3 easy lessons doesn't necessarily make it so. And so, how do you go about managing the expectations of students, and what would you speak to in that regard?
Oh, yeah, I have a couple. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm really straightforward and honest with all my students. I'm like, listen, I can give you tools, but I can't build the house.
Yeah,
So
great.
if you want to achieve certain things, your body is learning a fine motor skill when you are singing. And so it is just as much up to you to practice that coordination and to learn that coordination as it is for me to give you the tools and the exercises that will more quickly allow you to build that coordination. Because that's ultimately what singing is. It's coordinated phonation.
Yeah.
And I can't change someone's neurology. So I can't speed that up. I tend to approach it from that perspective where it's like, okay, I can give you tools, we're going to do exercises, but ultimately some people's bodies are going to just, I mean, it's like vocal folds, right? Like some people's vocal folds, they can, Dr. Bastian out of Chicago, he says everyone has a certain amount of vocal oscillations granted to them a day. And some people have way more than other people have granted to them. And we don't know that.
We don't know why.
Right?
Yep.
So I'm pretty straightforward and pretty honest. I'm not shy in calling people to the carpet when they're BSing me about practicing.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not shy about being like, you said you wanted this, because I don't actually have a practice policy in my studio. In my studio, if you want it, you're going to practice.
I'm not dissimilar actually. Yeah, I have a recommended, you know, when people ask me what what should they do, I can recommend what they should do, but I'll say this, I don't fall asleep at night wondering if my students are practicing.
No, I do teach them. If they say to me, I don't know how to practice, then I'm like, absolutely.
Different question. That's where I've got to recommend it. I can show you how to do it. And in fact, I send all of my students get a video on it and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like you say, it's not your responsibility to do the practice. That's the student's responsibility. And I think there is a certain sense of intrinsic, extrinsic locus of control going on here. The student has to take responsibility for their own learning.
Absolutely.
The teacher does have to take responsibility for the teaching, that is true. But the learner must take responsibility for the learning. And you can't blame any teacher. You know, I've had a couple of conversations over the years with students who have been wonderfully open in their, you know, their thoughts and whatever about the way they've been going, and they'll openly say, well, you know, I don't feel I've gotten anything out of this. Admittedly, I haven't practiced. Well, we'll just draw a line under that. See you later. Like, so, you know, at the end of the day, the student doesn't simply have to be present in the lesson to get something out of the lesson. You know, it's if it were that simple, you could just watch YouTube videos and literally,
or you can teach yourself.
Yeah, just do it. Just watch the videos, and suddenly by osmosis, it'll all happen.
Yeah, I think there are 4 questions. That students can ask going in.
Go for it.
And I wish more students asked me this, actually. Like when I get on that first call and like talk through with them, I'm like, I wish I would get asked these questions.
Yeah, okay.
And that is, where and how did you learn to teach? Not to sing. People ask me how I learned to sing, but I wish they would ask me where and how did you learn to teach? That's one question. The next one I would say is, how long have you been teaching private lessons? And that's not to say that you don't go with someone who's only been teaching for 2 years, but know know where that person's experiential journey is, just so, like you said, you're managing expectations, right?
Yeah.
And then this is a third one. Do you have a mentor? Do you have a mentor? Do you have a teacher that you go to, that you work with, that you talk with? Yes, I want all singing teachers to have that, right? I mean, we both have those, several, and we mentor each other, right? Like you get to a certain point because, you know, I'm a little on, even though I look so good with my pink hair, I'm a little on in the years. And, you know, the reality is then we get to mentor each other, right? You have similar experiences and you can say, oh, this curveball, like you said, came to me. What do you think?
Yeah.
You know? So do you have a mentor? And then what is your philosophy? Like, what is your philosophy of what voice lessons means?
Yeah.
And what we're expecting to get done? And those 4 questions will give you so much information about that teacher and how they're going to help you. Because if they're like any other voice teacher, they'll talk your ear off as soon as you ask that questions.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, and it's sorry, this is probably a separate point, but what you've said is sort of, you know, stirred up this next thought for me, and that is that anyone can actually teach a fandangled first session. You don't agree with the word anyone, probably not anyone, but a lot of people can do, work magic, and I can do things. When you've been doing this a little while, you learn tricks of the trade, and you can make the voice do things. I call it masterclass magic, you know, where you get the voice to radically do different things. That doesn't mean that anything has changed about what your voice is doing. The moment that voice then walks out of the studio, it'll forget that. It won't remember it. It won't retain it. And so that's the other thing I say to prospective students, whether they're looking for lessons from me or from someone else, is travel some journey with a teacher. Give them the opportunity to work with you over some time, because it's over time that you will see whether what they're working with you on is going to take hold and have an impact, a lasting impact on your voice.
You're really generous, because you said that your little term is like 4 to 6 lessons, and I require 6 months.
Wow.
So like after that first lesson, I say, you know, we start 6 months. And it's because I find that the coordinations, what we're working on, takes at least 6 months. And the first 2 months is all magic, right? It's all, like you said, the masterclass magic. Yeah. That's the first 2 months.
Yeah, the honeymoon.
Because especially if it's a brand new singer.
Brand new singer, yeah.
Because there are certain things that, like you said, we've been doing this for a while. There are certain things, especially with certain genres of music, that you can kind of expect is going to come into your studio, and you see the same types of compensations, you see the same types of inefficiencies, and you just know, like, oh, okay, there's just like the same 5 things, right? And that's the first 2 months. But once those things are kind of, you know, that onion is peeled a little bit, then we start getting into the real nitty gritty of that person's unique sound and that person's unique physiology, you know? And so that's why I do 6 months. I mean, maybe that sounds like a long time, but
look, I think it's probably driven by region. I think in Australia is very much a place of our school term sets our psychology up to think in 4 terms in a year. And so I think the psychology of the Australian populace, I could be wrong about this, kind of lends itself to 4 terms. And so I run to 4 terms. But I think that the idea behind 6 months, 3 months is the same. It's travel the distance with a teacher. Allow your voice. And the other thing I've said to students over the years is your voice will tell you, is this working? Is this not working?
Yeah.
A good teacher will teach you to trust that, because you develop a sense of confidence in your ability to read your own body and your own sound and your own sensations kinesthetically. So, you can start to get a sense of it. The gentleman that I saw this morning, I said to him, look, regardless of who you choose to go to, I said, can I encourage you? If it's the other lady, great. If it's me, great. But can I encourage you, no matter who it is, go a distance with them. Don't just, do 2 or 3 lessons. Actually give that teacher the opportunity to work with you over time, because it's you don't have to wed yourself to them and, after 3 years of getting nowhere. That's not what we're saying here. But I don't know any teacher that's going to require 12 months up front. It's just a matter of going that distance with them. Allow your voice to tell you. And here's the thing, if things are not working, the other thing I say to students is, please talk to me. Please communicate with me. And I was saying to this gentleman this morning, if this person, I said, I don't know who this person is who was rubbishing me on Facebook, and I don't, he's obviously had an experience that he wasn't happy with. But I can tell you, I don't remember having a conversation about this person being unhappy. Do you know what I mean? So there was never an opportunity for me to interact, and unless.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. I was going to say, unless I simply haven't heard and haven't read the right signals to pick up on the conversation. But be explicit with a teacher is what I'm saying. They can't mind read. Yeah, good. Yeah. No matter how good they are, they cannot mind read what's in your head. And so communicating clearly with your teacher is going to be in part what actually builds a productive lesson, because the teacher can then be responsive to you, and they can say, actually, I can't meet that expectation. Even if the expectation is reasonable and good, the teacher can go, hey, that's not in my wheelhouse. I can't help you here. Can I direct you to someone else?
Yeah. You know what this is making me think of is that we have a long line, like the history of voice teaching has a very muddy past, because there are a lot of teachers. I don't know about in Australia, but I know in the United States, there's a lot of the cult of the voice teacher, right? There'll be this one teacher, and they set up their studio to be this little mini cult.
Yeah.
And it's weird. And I think what you're saying here about share your opinions with, share where you're at with your teacher, that has been that's a great thing for the singer to think about, is if you don't feel safe sharing what you are feeling about your voice, if you are in an environment with a teacher where you are feeling like you don't have agency in your voice.
Yes. Preach it,
or
sister.
You don't have the safety to say how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Or where you're disagreeing.
Yes.
That is a red flag.
Absolutely.
That is a red flag.
Absolutely.
The moment you do not feel safe or comfortable, if someone touches you without being asked, if someone tells you what is right for your voice when you feel physically you're having pain or discomfort.
Yes.
To me, that's kind of the other thing too. Maybe you're not experiencing that in the first lesson, but as you said, if you're going to go distance with this person, please, us teachers, we're going to require this time up front, but never, your money is, let's say you prepaid for 6 months of lessons with someone and they started to treat you in a way that was abusive, leave the money. Just
Yeah.
call it the most expensive lesson you ever learned and get out of Dodge right away.
Yes.
Like, feel empowered to leave a situation where you are not autonomous.
Yeah. Yes.
I got really passionate about that.
Well, I'm glad you did, because there certainly has been some of that here in the land down under. I am cognizant of it also happening in the US, and I think it happens. I think it happens everywhere, because at the end of the day, human beings are involved in this process. So it is so. I love the word you used, empowered. A good singing teacher is about empowering you. Student-focused lessons are not about the teacher; they are about the student. And any lesson, and this is, I'll throw it out there. This is why I don't audition students. There are teachers who I know who audition and kind of, have a prereq for that. That to me has always seem to lean towards, and I want to be careful here, because I don't think I can be completely categoric about it, but that seems to me to lean towards the teacher ensuring that they're only ever teaching the best voices. And that, to me, leans towards being teacher-focused, not student-focused. Your job as a student is not to make the teacher look good. I had Brian Gill here. Brian Gill has been on the channel, and he was here at the ANATS conference a couple of years ago, and I loved what he said, because I've said it in my own studio so many times before and since, and that is, if things are not working for you in a lesson, that's not your fault as a student. It's the teacher's responsibility to pivot, to adjust, to try something new. It's not the student's fault. And yet you and I have both, and this is where I think you're coming from, you and I have both seen and experienced lessons where it's sort of like, well, why can't you do it? Everyone else can do it. Your voice should be able to do that. Well, no, it's not how it is. Student-focused lessons are about empowering the student and really looking to reinforce the ego of the student, not the other way around.
Yes. I'm having thoughts. Because I think on one hand...
You'll need to have them quickly, because we're nearly out of time.
Okay. So one thing, just to throw a pebble in the pond around auditioning students. I think there's that. I do agree that lessons are student focused, but I also know that when a teacher is trying to teach a student that they are not a good fit with, for any reason, right? It could be either a technical reason, like they don't feel comfortable with male passaggio, or a personality reason,
Sure.
Maybe there's a family that has a special needs child that teacher doesn't feel equipped to be able to handle, or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for auditioning, not for the best voice, right? Not for best voices, but am I really going to be able to teach this person? Do we get on?
And I think, but I think we are distinguishing between two different things there. I don't think people who have auditions for their lessons are thinking about
just the word, like the word audition makes
that
it
word
feel
audition
like
for me says, are you going to be a good enough singer? Auditions, certainly we understand the process of auditions for getting into universities, etc. It is a vetting process. We're going to take the best voices. And on one level, I get that. Equally, for a private studio, I always stop short when I hear of a private studio doing a similar process, not for the reasons you just outlined, which are all right and proper. I'm talking about, making, auditioning students with the pure view to really, this has always been my observation. You know, I just want to find the best voices, because if I'm teaching the best voices, it'll make me look good.
Yeah,
And
well, that's ego-driven.
It's ego-driven.
Teaching.
Absolutely.
Which is why, I mean, just to bring it all full circle, since
Good,
we're almost
because
at the end,
we do need to come.
which is why I did that stop voice teacher bullying post.
Yes.
And why this can be a very scary conversation.
It is.
Voice teaching can be a very toxic, to other voice teachers can be very toxic.
Yeah.
And because ultimately there's so much ego that tends to be involved.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have to keep ourselves in check. We have to say, am I making this about me right now? When a student fails even. Because I got to tell you, if you're the type of person that is going to make a student success your business, you're also going to be the type of person that makes their failure your business.
Yeah.
And that's not a healthy place to be, to other people's successes and failures deciding how you value yourself and where you see yourself in the world and where you're helping people.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other.
That is a whole nother. We might put it there and hold off until we come back. There's been so many questions in the chat. Everyone, we're not going.
Anything good?
We are not going to get to the questions in the chat. We're just not, because I've got to teach in 10 minutes, as I do every Monday. It's such an important topic, because people, you know, understandably, you know, when I'm looking for a mechanic, I don't know what makes a good mechanic, because I'm not a mechanic. You know, so when I'm looking for a good mechanic, I do have to take, you know, I put it out to friends and say, if I've got someone who's mechanically minded, you know, where do you take your car, and blah blah. We do have to sort of put it out there to sort of draw on word of mouth and those sorts of things, and it can be a very challenging, dare I say, minefield to find the right teacher fit for you. And you know, teachers with a little bit more experience have a wider spectrum of fit. But I don't think I'll ever get to the point where I will be a full 360-degree spectrum. I don't think I'll ever be the perfect teacher for every human being on the planet. It's not possible. I continue to grow. Michelle, you continue to grow in your teaching. You know, good teachers are constantly seeking to grow in their teaching. But, you know, you can't, you know, roughly speaking, you can't please all the people all the time. And so, as I said to this gentleman this morning, which is a kind of a way of us sort of wrapping up, you know, you've got to go with who you feel most comfortable with, and, you know, applying the questions that you asked earlier, Michelle, which I think were just fantastic, and then jump into the process, taking responsibility for you as the learner, you know, trusting that also that you've sought out a good teacher who's going to take their responsibility seriously as well.
Yeah. And a great teacher is going to pass you on if they know that they're not the right fit for you. A good teacher is going to say, I respect you as a singer enough to know that I don't have the tools.
Yeah.
But a good teacher will also be well respected in their community, so they have someone to say, but I know the perfect person for you.
Yeah.
And here's their name and number.
Yeah.
So, or email.
Yeah.
You know, it's, I really believe that everyone can find the right teacher when we ask the right questions, and we're not scared. We're not scared to ask specific questions about what we need, what our kids need.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think it's a win-win. Hard questions are the win-win.
Communication. Communicate. You know, ask the questions. Wow. Did we cover some ground today?
I know, we always do that. I love how we're like, let's talk about this, and then magically an hour goes
we,
by.
we can honestly say, and I think this has been the case pretty much every time we've got together, maybe not the first time where we didn't know each other enough, but ever since, every time we got together, we literally go, let's talk about this topic, and that's it. That's okay. We'll talk about this today. We don't really take any notes. I mean, my only note today was about Jeff's passing. That's literally my only note. So always a pleasure. Thank you for being my first guest for 2020.
I'm so honored.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Okay.
And
not 2 years next time, okay, dude?
We're not going to let it go 2 years. Yeah, and my next guest, you'll love this, Michelle, is Shannon Coates. So
I love Shannon.
Shannon's going to come onto the show in a few weeks' time. I have a lot of fun with her as well. Just letting everyone know, next week we're going to be doing the live song review with Linda, which will be fantastic, which will almost certainly mean we're going to then do Q&A. So there's been a string of questions that Linda's been taking down. We will get to those in a couple of weeks. I'm sorry we didn't have time today. It's just that Michelle and I just know how to chew the fat. And I hope in our chewing the fat that it's been helpful to you, because I do believe, everyone, you all know I've got a YouTube channel. That's what we're watching right now. I've got an online course, but it is my personal belief that the gold standard of learning to sing is private one-on-one lessons. That's my humble opinion, personally. I have all of those other facilities and learning opportunities to create access and accessibility, because online lessons, or private lessons may not be something you can afford for time or money. But if you can, in my opinion, they cannot be beat. The gold standard is that one-on-one. So there you go. If you've enjoyed today's show, hit the thumbs up. Michelle, you're awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will look forward to when we next hang out, because it's always a lot of fun. But I really do have to go, because you've got to get off to do whatever you do of a night time. I've got to get off and teach one more lesson.
Have a great lesson.
I will. One of my favorite students is coming in next. I look forward to seeing all of you next week. I'll see you then, Michelle. I'll see you online in some forum somehow. See you, everyone. I'm Dr. Dan. Sing well.